Okay, let's go ahead and get things started. Once again, thank you everyone for joining, whether you found us on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. We're so glad you're here. And we want to get things started with giving you a little bit of insight on what Blueprint is, who we are, and then we'll get into UX. So Blueprint is a technology solutions company, and we are headquartered in Bellevue of Washington. And we do have other locations all across the country and other parts of the world too. So no matter where you're joining from, we're so excited to have you on here. So what we do is that we are a technology solutions company that bridges the gap between strategy, implementation, delivery, execution, all of that goodness. And what we do is we work with clients on some problem that they're having. And then once we create the solution, we either change it into a managed service, productize it, automate it, or even deliver it to the client's team to run. And really it is, we create products that are manageable long-term and really benefit the company and bring out the best in all of what they have already. So we really like to emphasize anything that they currently have and just make it even better. So I am going to introduce our team that we have, and we're going to focus on how we use data and UX and combine that. So first of all, we have the star of the show, Zoe Douglas. She is a BI and UX engineer. She's really been working with Power BI since the start of it. So she knows everything about it. You're going to see some of the awesome things that she's built. Trust me, you are going to be wowed. So stick around because it's going to get really, really awesome. Next, we have Lauren, and he is a UX architect at Blueprint. And he deals with a lot of the design and engineering, and he's been doing this for a very long time as well. Next, we have Thomas, and Thomas is a client development director, and he has been doing this also for a very long time, but really helps use data and tells a story with that data. So I totally forgot. I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Ruthie Senanayaka, and I am an event manager. I work in the marketing department here at Blueprint Technologies, and we are so excited to have you all on our Zoom call. So we have quite a few participants on right now, so it's a great time to hop into the subject. If you have any questions throughout this time, there is a Q&A section within Zoom. All you have to do is click on that button and send in a question, and we will make sure to answer that at the end of this, this whole presentation. Just to let you know, we will be recording this, so if you are taking notes and you want to make sure you don't miss something, don't worry, we have it recorded. We'll make sure to send it to all attendees and anyone who wasn't able to make it on as well. We'll also be posting this on our social media platforms, so be sure to follow along, and we'll be posting it on there, as well as any upcoming webinars that you'd like to take part in. So again, if you have any questions, add it to the Q&A section, and you can also connect with all of us on LinkedIn to answer anything further. But without further ado, let's give it over to Thomas Shaw.
Thanks, Ruthie. And that was a really nice way of saying I've done this a really long time by just saying I'm really old, but I like to say it's wise too. But thanks for that and the background on Blueprint, and I will hand over to the real rock stars of this pretty quickly. But you know, just to frame things up, what you know, if any of you that are on it attended our previous UX webinars, we're talking about how UX is you know, really just pervasive throughout our organization, and how we use it through all aspects of you know, of our implementations or productization, or just even just in strategy and requirements gathering. We think that the people pillar of the people, process, and technology is the most underutilized or sometimes trivialized pillar when people do different projects. And for us, it's just it's first and foremost in everything we do, and understanding who the audience is, who the consumer is, and that's what user experience is really all about. And so we don't like the word training at Blueprint. If you have a bunch of people's time and and you're going to bring them in, and we don't want to show them how to click through an application. We want to create an application or presentation or tool, utility, reports that are completely self-intuitive. For any of you that download apps on your phone, they don't come with instructions much. They come with sometimes this little sketch screen to show you how to use things. So we live in an age where people don't want to have to deal with training and trying to understand how to do something. And what we want is to build something that's intuitive, but then also has just the value. That the value is what brings you to it, and you understand the value of that tool and why you're there, and then make it very easy to use. So I don't think anybody can argue with Elon Musk right now. I think he's doing all right for himself. So as he said, anything that needs a manual it's broken, and we subscribe to that theory 100%. So for those of you familiar with The Office, don't be Michael. And the part of this is, Michael's not always, he's not always great about how he understands people and relates to people. As you know, he just kind of comes in with his agenda, and that created quite a comic series for a while. I think it was a 16-year anniversary yesterday, I heard. But what Michael didn't do is try to understand people. So for us, the art of the possible is all about facilitating innovation, understanding who the people are, what their resistance to change is, or history is, what are all the different types of people that are going to use your tools and use your data and reporting, and understand how they truly leverage data on a daily basis, and how it makes them tick, right? And what it is that's, and how that aligns with really with the strategic initiatives of the company. So when we say UX is important throughout our organization, it's not just that we just bring in UX architects like Florin. It's people like Zoe, where she has a very unique skill as far as data modeling and being a data engineer, but also data visualization. But she supplements that with her superpower component of user experience. And so we're all ambassadors to that, and how we try to strategize and create a culture of human-centeredness. And that's really a role that Florin plays, that he'll get into. And so what we're going to show here today is just how Zoe really exemplifies this culture, and how she creates better outcomes through UX as she brings it to data visualization. And for years, you go back to the days of crystal reports, if any of it that rings a bell for any of this audience, and you've been doing this as long as I have or longer. And those were some of the first interactive reports, really, right? And that just meant it had a filter that was going to change a 100-page paginated report by one slicer, right? And then those things started evolving, and now we have these tools that are just really empowering users to consume all of this data. But now it's so much data, we need to, what's the needle, find the needle in the haystack, or, as Nate Silver said, the signal in the noise. Let's find that signal in the noise, and you got to have intuitive tools to be able to do that, and really understand your users to do that. So don't be Michael, right? And we can't bring up Michael if you're not going to bring up Roy or something. So this was just a fun quote that we remember from The Office, that Pam's art is the best art of all the art, and we want to create the best reports of all the reports, and best experience for people. So Roy might have been onto something there with what he saw in Pam. But so I'm going to kick this over to Florin, and Florin really, he is the ambassador of user experience within our organization, and it all comes back to him. So if we're not doing it well, he's the one throat to choke. But I think we are doing it very well, and a lot of it is because of just of his ideas and how he understands people, and how to apply that. And what we'll get into really today is getting away from that old aspect of just presenting data, and even though it's ad hoc, but truly telling a story with data. What are you trying to achieve, and how do you not just get an answer, but tell a story of the data that aligns with your strategic initiative? So I'll stop, and I'm going to hand this over to Florin and let him run with it from here.
Yeah, and I'll comment on what we have on the screen here. What I love about the irony of what I see here, you see the underline on HCI on there, and maybe the spell check going, what is this word? I have no idea. And it's maybe a theme or a motif going back to how many acronyms and words and jargon that you hear when you hear the concept of user experience. So I'll keep this quick, but what I want to do is just really quick. I want to give you the formal definition as per the Interactive Design Foundation, a really good authority on this topic. But UX is obviously user experience, and it's the quality of experience a person has when interacting with a specific design. Simple as that. It can be just distilled into that sentence. And if you go ahead and advance that slide, but you know, UX can be formalized within an organization, but most of the time it's informal. So within a formal kind of process, a user-centered design process, and a design thinking process, you go through your research, you go through your ideation, your burning down of possibilities for this solution. You start to prototype, you start to test, you evaluate that, you evaluate your hypothesis. Does this make sense? And then you get into the materializing aspect of producing what it is you want to produce. So this kind of process that you see here, right? It looks very linear. It looks very, you know, easy to follow, siloed, you know, throw things over a wall. But in reality, it's not the way it goes. So most of the people on this call, I would imagine, would see things more like the next slide here, which is just much more in line with how you see projects going. You might go into research, and you might end up in, you know, way past research into prototyping and ideating. But the point to get across here is that that's okay, and we need to champion that. As long as we're running through the principles and the processes that UX brings to us, that's key. So UX can be formalized within an organization, but most of the time it's informal. That's the point to get across here. So folks in non-design roles at businesses who do a lot of uncredited user experience work, like research, testing, flow charting, prototyping, it may not be formalized or even called the same thing, right? But the lack of formality does not make that work any less valid. So the vast majority is conducted this way. User experience work is conducted this way. And so think about it like this. Oftentimes it's more efficient for a specialist to integrate user experience practices into his or her domain than it is for the user experience professional to try to grok or understand that in particular domain, right? So when thinking about visualization and data visualization, we know that dashboards need to be accessible, they need to be reliable, they need to be usable, right? And this is where someone like Zoe comes in. So, you know, when you think about a dashboard, screens should spark strategic questions of the users, of the people that are actually looking at this data / insights, right? And they should lead to actionable insights intuitively without having to be trained. Double clicking on what Thomas said earlier about not needing a manual, right? Dashboards, visualizations shouldn't either. So with that, I want to throw it to Zoe so she can take you through her own process, how she does things. And I want to make this a little bit of a conversation where we kind of dig in and ask her questions. So please, if you guys have questions, pop it into the Q&A. We'll chime in on your behalf. And at the end, we'll leave a little bit of room for that as well. So Zoe, take it away.
I think we have one already, Florin, and it hits on just what you and Zoe were talking about yesterday on the kind of the clicks to greatness. But it's what kind of metrics do you use to gauge the effectiveness of dashboards and visuals? Yeah,
let's get to that in a little bit. That actually, we're going to have a couple of things that will fit into that. But I'll make sure to keep that in there. Right, but cool. Yeah, go ahead, Zoe.
Zoe, you ready to share, Zoe? You wait a second.
Can you go to the next slide first, and I'll talk to that one, and then I'll share. So hello everyone, thanks for joining, and thank you so much, Florin and Shaw and Ruthie. Really appreciate it. So, you know, as I said, you know, my specialty is making Power BI reports, and that's what I've been doing since Power BI was released. But before that, I was using Excel, you know, and I did a lot of Excel work, and the same kind of stuff that I was doing there is I'm doing in Power BI. But this, you know, and doing really anything that, you know, I'm sharing with the client, you know, I use Visio a lot. You know, anyway, visual ways to kind of represent data is really where I found my sweet spot. One of the things that's really critical to my process is that the data doesn't the data is not just for the data's sake, it's for somebody, it's for something. So this is the kind of user design, it's not in a vacuum. It's not just out there, doing its thing. It's for something. And so a lot of times when I'm talking to our clients, I'm trying to get an understanding of kind of their, I have to understand their data. I have to understand them. I have to understand their business. And I have to understand these information so that I can make informed decisions. They don't know that everything Power BI can do just like I do. And I don't know everything they need to see from Power BI and their data like they do. And so I really need to work on bridging that gap. And I think that's what this slide is about, is some of those questions that I ask or try to get answers for as much as possible. And even if I can't find the answers, I'm making an assumption at some point. And, as educated as I can, I'll, try and absorb as much information as possible and try and think, how would they want to see it? How would that make sense for them to utilize this data? It's best if I can ask directly, but sometimes we don't always get that luxury. So, the biggest part about a report is it's supposed to drive some action. It's not, maybe there are some reports that's just supposed to, just give, high, overview, this is kind of the breadth and depth of what we do kind of idea. But a lot of times, if they have some, KPIs or a metric they're really tracking towards, because they're responsible, and that's going to have a big impact on, say, their review cycle or how well the business is going to do. And they need to keep on top of it to make sure that they can address it in a timely manner and hopefully reverse the trend if it's going down, or if it's going well, finding out what was and keep doing that. So because of the actions, so a lot of times I ask them, I'm like, well, what do what actions do you want from his, or what do you think the data is saying? A lot of times they have they have an idea of what it's, supposed to be doing. And then I can get in there and I can either validate, or I can say, hey, that's actually not what I'm seeing, and have that conversation. Then they're more enabled, then they're enabled to make decisions to get it to where they think it is, or even improve upon it. And now another thing is, like, I like particular charts, like I like ribbon charts and I like box and whisker charts. Nobody else does. So a lot of times I'll ask them, what other reports are they used to seeing? How are they used to seeing this data? Like I've been working with a lot of oil and gas, and I found out pretty quickly, like they have colors that represents certain things in very kind of standardized industry reports. And so they would like to see them in those colors. So when I had like the oil numbers in a different color than what they're expecting, it was very glaring for them. It was very different. So they were like, oh, that looks weird, so it's not following those kind of industry trends. So kind of getting an idea. If they have a report they really like, I'd love to see it. If they have one they hate, I'd love to see it. I'd love to know why. If they don't like pie charts, maybe their manager or CEO doesn't like to see pie charts. Okay, so that's really good information to know. I won't include them. And Power BI has some really cool features to it that do enable the user to change things like what chart type after it's published in that published kind of format, which doesn't impact or write back to the actual report. They can reset it afterwards. And that's a kind of gets into the kind of self-service BI at like the easiest level. A lot of times I need to ask, like, kind of what are they doing with this report? Are they sharing it? Are they printing it? Are they exporting it and then marking it up? A lot of times finance does that, where they'll want to export it. Then they'll go ahead and validate like invoice numbers. And they want to be able to then, mark it up, have a link to the report, to the actual invoice in the Excel, in the export, and then they can send it over to whoever can fix it in the source data systems. So understanding those kind of processes that they want to use that data so they can build, especially Power BI. Power BI has a lot of really great options, but it helps to know what they want to do with it when I'm building it, so then I can cater to those up front. How much time do they have spent in the report? So you can make reports. So that's that kind of that metric, like, clicks to insight, or, surfacing up that information as soon as possible. So finding out what the key thing they want to see. So if they see this number is good, they probably don't need to look anymore. they're good, whereas we maybe have another person who's going to click in and kind of find out what's going on where and drill through to it and find their particular piece, and that also goes into, Power BI has built into it ways to have filtering by URL, which is not a security feature, but it can enable them to get right down to the information they're wanting to look at. So looking at their store or their region or their numbers. And then you also have object level security and row level security, which will filter out all the other data if it's not pertinent to them, but also be able to put all the data together for, say, upper management. How they use that report. A lot of, the typical scenario for Power BI is you're sitting at a desk on your computer, you're looking at it in the web browser. But Power BI is really great on tablet, it's really great on mobile device. So you can, so if I know the information up front, I can build those mobile views in Power BI and make it so it's easier to see, not quite so many tooltips. Tooltips are a little bit tricky on the mobile. Drill through works, but it's a little bit clunky. So trying to cater to that experience so that it's not like, oh man, I can only look in here, but it's teeny font, I can't read anything, that kind of thing. Another piece of that is also using some of the functionality in Power BI to assist them. So that was with one client, and I built a report for them, and I was at their office. This is pre-pandemic, and they were about to go into a meeting, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to look at this report. Can I?" And I was like, "Well, can I sit in?" And so they let me sit in. And what I noticed what they were doing is I was scanning each category month by month and looking for outliers is what they were actually doing. And I was like, I can actually build in conditional formatting on that table. If it's outside of a certain range, it will highlight that value for you, not just by low to high, but average of that line by over 200%, they'll highlight in red. So they're kind of doing that job for them. And that was really great. So it was well received. So having that ability to kind of sit in and see what they're doing and what their processes are to match up and make Power BI work for them, that works really well. And you can do, similar things, but I think like that example to me was really interesting. You can do similar in Excel, I think now, but that was actually quite tricky to do previously, but it's fairly easy to do in Power BI. So then that kind of gets into, so that's the user side, but it's also marrying it up with what the data has. So it's kind of important as well for my role to go in and look at what the data story is. So the data will have its own kind of story. Maybe it's missing a whole bunch of data. That's an important one to highlight. And making sure I understand what their data means to their business. And what that means is, each number in there is going to be something that speaks to some part of their business, whether it's expenses or volumes or number of tickets or anything like that. But understanding how that moves over time, like, getting an understanding of the granularity, getting an understanding of, is this like 1 million rows per year? Is this, 100,000 per day? Whatever, kind of getting all that, how it moves and what things happen to it as time goes on. And that's really key, because then that gets into kind of making architectural decisions about, how to set this up in Power BI, make it effective, make it usable, make it performant. Do they need to see it? Does it come into the data, into our systems, in 10-minute increments, or is it once a month? So those have big impacts on kind of how we go about recommending those different scenarios. So anyway, I've said a lot of words about the user. So there's a very specific kind of understanding your audience to make those better decisions when you're designing reports, when you're setting up, how the reports are shared and used by our clients. But there is also, in helping the user with the reports, there's very generic things you can do, and that's kind of that user experience. And these are some of these core tenets that Florin is very familiar with. That he lives and breathes this stuff, and if you do any of the website or app stuff, but it's really important on any report that uses data, not just Power BI. Now my specialty is Power BI. That's all I work in at this point. But it's helped the user make sense of the data And so I was going to show you some stuff that you can utilize in your reports. Maybe, so one of the things I found about, I want to say about a year ago, I was looking at my reports and I was like, something is missing. Like I have my data here. I'm having a struggle with like, it doesn't look right to me. I'm having trouble. And that's when I started really looking into kind of design stuff, kind of what are the best practice, some tips, you know, stuff like that. And so I'll kind of show you, walk through that process. So, Shaw, I'm going to steal the screen.
I wanted to address a couple questions.
Mhm.
So I saw say no to 3D charts and pie charts. Couldn't agree more.
Yes, yes, I agree.
And someone asked, is this a Power BI marketing campaign? Power BI is our catalyst. It's our catalyst for this presentation. You know, you can do a lot of these things with Spotfire, with Tableau, you know, especially in other tools. You know, but we had no skin in the game. We partner with all the above, probably more with Microsoft than anyone, but by no means is this a campaign. It's just it's an example of the fact that it's now created these capabilities for people like Zoe and Florin to finally answer questions. You know, the tools are evolving, and there's many tools. And today we're doing a lot in Power BI. You know, one specifically, you know, it says a question for Zoe is how much time is added to your report creation timeline by all of these UX concerns. You know, and
That's a great question.
I'm gonna let her run it. I would say it reduces it because we're asking better questions and we're creating better quality reports. But that's a question for Zoe, not for me. So I'll let you do that. And in the meantime, I'll stop sharing too. So.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would absolutely say the thing is, if you don't address these questions, these will come up as pain points. They will come up definitely. Oops, sorry, it's my video, not the sharing. I can't talk and click at the same time. So I wanted to, you know, very quickly say, you know, if you don't address those upfront, they will become pain points. You know, maybe you didn't realize that they were emailing the report out. Maybe you didn't realize any of that information. And then it will come up later like, oh, well, you know, actually, this is a great report, but we all use we want to use our phones to look at the report. And you've made this incredibly detailed report and it's not going to work out well. Anyway, so here I wanted to show just a really quick one. So I pulled this together last night. I just dropped in some KPIs, added the logos, some slicers, and we have kind of the revenue and sales and product costs going here. And we have, you know, region, and we have our product line. And so then I went ahead and, you know, I didn't do a whole lot to this. You know, I kind of left it the base colors, didn't really change any titles, you know, it's kind of lined it a little bit. But then I went ahead and I did do some work on it that I would do if I was using this report. And I'll go over some of these things that I made changes to this report. One of them is I'm using a scrim, which is just a fancy word for a background that provides these boxes and the boxes for the shapes. Now, this has two purposes. One, I'm not, you know, I'm not a designer. I didn't go to school to learn how to make really fancy, pretty graphics. I learned about data. And so one of the things I did, you know, a year ago is I started looking around at kind of reports that I liked, reports that I thought were pretty, and not just Power BI. I mean, Tableau has a ton of examples of it. And I kind of looked at it and like, well, what do I like about this? You know, what can I reuse? How do I implement this when I'm creating my reports in a way it doesn't take me another 3 weeks to push out a report? So I did both of these, and I built a data model all last night, just in a couple of hours. Now, I'm able to do that so quickly because I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to show. And then I added this, and then I just kind of made all the stuff fit and made it prettier. So other key elements, you know, giving stuff space, you know, grouping like things. These kind of things really help the user understand the data, making sure the colors kind of have a rhyme to their, you know, a reason for their existence. So here, these are all about orders. So I made them purple. You know, these are about revenue and cost. So I did the blue. I did do the purple again because the purple is a perfect color here. But so if I look at this chart here, when I look at this, I really wanted to kind of get a feel for, as the sales are all going up here, and I can see my revenues going up and my costs are going up and all that, but what does that actually mean for revenue? It's fine if our sales go up, but if our revenue is kind of, if we're costs are kind of eating into our revenue, we're making less money, maybe we don't need to be working quite as hard. So here,
can I jump in here just real quick to
yeah.
Touch on a couple of things that so as someone that, really appreciates how UX kind of can have this impact in many different ways. I want to just touch on the fact that your titles here, the way they speak to what is meant to be read by the chart itself, right? So thinking of accessibility, thinking of usability, reducing the time to insight, to basically say, you're looking at this chart here, as our sales change over time, how does it impact our revenue margin? That comes through, right? Like inherently, but you can also now read it from the title. And I think titling is key. And it goes back to what you said about design and you weren't formally trained in design. Well, that's not what UX is, right? UX can be design, but UX is also doubling down on the purpose and the need that the user has and the person, the human has behind it. So I just wanted to call that out on this particular one because I thought it was relevant to all different types of dashboards, whether it's Power BI, Tableau, Click, Alteryx, doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, and that's perfect, Lauren. And yeah, so the titling here actually has a dual purpose. So it is to help, convey to the user what you created this chart for, but also when I'm creating the report, it helps me to make sure that I have a purpose for a chart. I'm not just putting it there because it kind of looks pretty or it kind of has a neat feel to it. It makes me go ahead and define what is the question that I'm actually trying to answer. What is the insight I'm trying to show on this chart? And so it helps when I'm designing a report to kind of bubble that up and make sure, and then I can write, I'm like, or maybe I should, first maybe it's like, what is our revenue over time? Well, maybe that's not what I want to know. And so then I'll kind of go the next layer down. So here I focused on, as sales change over time, how does it impact our revenue margin? And so you can see here, it's rather flat. And then, orders come from what regions, orders include what products, kind of getting a feel for that information. And then I put these slicers, I put them on a vertical kind of thing. This is not a different slicer. This is actually the out of box Power BI one. It took me a while to figure out how to do it, which is a little embarrassing to admit. But this one, maybe you have two audiences. Maybe you want finance people want to see this by finance months, and maybe the sales folks don't care, they want to see it by the calendar month. So you can have those, Power BI can fully context switch like that so the users can see how they like. You can see it by different fiscal years or calendar years and kind of get into that data there. Another thing you can do here is also, of course, these ones are going to do the end of those periods, but you can also click on any one of them or multiple of them if you hold down Control, and you can see the quarter. So you can kind of see here, see like, okay, great, May, we had a reduction from this month. What happened? You can kind of click around, you can see, well, North America came back with a lot of orders, the order count was down, that kind of stuff. So you can kind of see what maybe those drivers are. So this is like a first pass, and I would look into it and I would start clicking, I'd role play the user. I'd be like, well, if I was someone, I would want to know, well, hey, how come we're doing really great compared to this month? What happened? Maybe I need to bring in more data. Maybe there's promotion data that I don't have surfaced here. Maybe there was a pandemic. So this data is fairly old, so it's not going to impact there. Another part of this data and stuff like that. So you can kind of get into it that way and start. And then once you start iterating, and that's that iteration, you get into it, you put it out, you can iterate really fast in Power BI. You can put this out, put it in front of the customer and say, hey, your client saying you can work through it. And they're like, yes, it's great, Zoe. Or, hey, I'd really like to see this, or, we're actually really interested in XYZ. Can you show me if promotions actually had an impact on this? stuff like that. And then I can go back and make those changes. Another thing that like prototyping, you know, when you're doing like a website or stuff like that, you have to kind of really define those up front, and because it's a lot of work to build in each piece and build the, you know, and same with an app, you know, placing buttons and stuff is actually a lot of work. Where in Power BI, it's very, very quickly. You can go from, you know, I just copied this, tossed it over here, added this scrim, and did that kind of information. And so if you're wondering how to do this, you know, you can go to like Power BI tips. They have a few in there that's free to use. They're very easy to add. You know, you just go in here, and not in the filters pane, sorry. So you can go in here into the page information, page background, sorry. You can add the image. And then I have saved on my computer, this is the Microsoft, this is that skateboard report. And you can go and download all the different scrims. So you're like, okay, well, I want to put 3 charts side by side, and I want to do a red. You can toss it in there, reduce this, and then you have to go, hold on, I'm getting interference from Zoom here, fit it in. So now you have, you know, I didn't have to design that. I just I'm reusing what other great people who have designed are using. This is a really wood one because it is created for Power BI reports. You kind of have this space where you can put buttons. You have this top space, you know, I have, you know, different layouts, and you can just use the white background that most images come with default. So very easy to kind of quickly reshape a report that way. There's a lot of different ones out there that you can use and reuse in different variety of reports. Another one I wanted to show you was another example of this is I had built a report a while ago, and it's this sales report. And then I redid it using another template that I found, which is an Numera template. And they have really good, what I like about Numera is they have a really good kind of document that kind of explains these different tips of kind of minimizing, reducing clutter, white space, and organizing it in that fashion. So if you see this report, it's not, you know, I built this one, this is mine. And I was like, okay, so I put the stuff up here, and I thought it was pretty good, you know, but I couldn't quite figure out what I was trying to say with it. You know, showing a lot of numbers. I included a lot of interesting features, but it wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. And so that's when I started really looking into that stuff. And I rebuilt that one. It's exact same visuals. I did not change any. I only added some cards because I actually had more space. So interestingly enough, once I gave my visuals more breathing room, you know, because I'm trying to maximize the space as much as possible. But when I stopped doing that, I actually ended up with more space to put more things, which I thought was really interesting. And here I can kind of, you know, I can put little notes, you know, colored by order volume, you know, and I still have my tooltips. I can click on things and things change. I added in. So one of the things I liked about this one is I wanted to highlight the top and bottom performing by month, but I also wanted a way to show that, yeah, okay, so bean bags are doing great, and they've been fairly consistent. But the reason why they're doing really great is because we sold less in April, but we sold about the same amount in March. So it's not like it's a huge run on bean bags. And even on the bottom half of it was, you know, where do we lose money? Yeah, but I can see here that for our dinnerware, we did, you know, sell less, we lost money, we didn't make so much money on them last month, but it's a fairly even trend. And I still made overall these 5 months, I made $250,000 off those, and I made about the same amount on the top performing one. So it's kind of giving that context. I really like to balance out numbers with context to make sure it's not like, oh man, well, we should just discontinue dinnerware. So giving the users the tools, you know, in right where they need it to enable them to make those kind of decisions or look at it a little bit differently, look into it a bit deeper, you know, without having to go, you know, go do a query or something like that, especially for like your sales teams. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll add a couple of things here that, you know, I've seen you do in practice, and I know that is super important to you as you iterate over these types of essentially prototypes. What you're doing is you're creating something that maybe is MVP, minimum viable, can I get the insights that I want or I need out of these? No, let's go back and iterate over them. And so the things that we've seen be effective is, back of napkin, let's take a look at what you actually need. And let's put that in front of you. And we can access the beauty of technology today is that we can jump into the data right away. We can start pulling it in, and we can start creating some, mock-ups. We can start creating some real feeling, looking prototypes of this data. And so this is very much in line with what we do in application development, right? Well, albeit it's harder there, right? Because there's more hands-on keys, you got to code, you got to do this stuff, right? But we're empowered when we do data viz because we can pull in that data right away. We can fail as fast as we need to fail in front of our end user, the folks that are going to be using this to gain insights, to make actionable insights into decisions and spark questions. If they don't do that, we can go back and say, how about this one, right? So iteration is a really, really key piece to touch on here. And you're doing this, right? You're showing us the life cycle of kind of how you build these, which I think is a really cool thing to tie that into.
Yeah, at first I wanted to, kind of bury this somewhere and never show it again, but I thought that was really important because it's a process. And failing fast, it's one of the kind of blueprint things, but it's really important and it's really easy, if you put up there like, oh man, I hate this. I'm like, well, why do you hate it? I'll change it, and we can get to
we say
what
fail
direction.
forward.
Fail forward, sorry, fail forward. My bad.
Not really, I'm just joking, but
and so the other one here, I actually have a tip for this one too, is the kind of top and bottom on the same chart, so they have the same axes. Those kind of ideas, reducing clutter, removing the axes, if you have, especially if the data labels turned on, and that kind of thing. And one of the things I like about, they talk about accessibility in Power BI and stuff like that, but you can like focus things, you can get into it. I don't know if I can do it here. This is a published to web, but if you have it in your company's, browser in the Power BI service, you can go ahead and change things and do all kinds of things. So it gets into kind of self-service part. So you can make decisions. The user is enabled to make those changes. And I don't think any other tool, I might be wrong, I don't know every other tool, but I know Power BI does it really well. So I won't say I know other tools. This is another one I did. This is using one of the Power BI.tips scripts. So my portfolio here is using the Enterprise DNA challenges. I really like them because they gave me kind of a context when I was building my portfolio. So if you're, a data analyst or BI, you're like, oh man, I want to be able to build some stuff and be able to show it, when I'm talking to interviewers, when I'm trying to say, hey, I can do these cool things, I need somebody to show it. I found there's a lot of other challenges around there now too. It's a lot more fun. One of the things I really, really like about it is that I get to see what other people have done with the exact same data set. And they come up with wildly different things than I would ever have imagined. And it gives me that, it kind of breaks me away from stuff I like and less stuff I want to see, and kind of gives me more visibility into kind of what others would get out of the same data set. And I can't even stress how powerful that was. It was really eye-opening to me because I was like, well, I would never have done it that way. And so it's really important, especially when I'm working with clients, to put, so, to the comment to like 3D charts and pie charts are bad. And generally, yes, for UX the thing, but if the client really wants it, maybe that really works for them, that's fine too. So this one, I did use the scrim again, so then I could focus on making reports. I didn't have to worry about the colors so much. I could play around with different features, spend more time playing with different charts that I wanted to see, how I wanted to see it, what would work best for me. By the way, this is 2 charts, so it's easy on the performance, showing kind of how this data, so I can kind of get into them playing around with different ways of visualizing this data.
Hey Zoe, I just wanted
Yes, go ahead.
really quick to let you know there's a couple questions in Q&A that are directly related to what you're showing right now. Do you mind just going through with them?
Do I click here, Ruthie?
You're muted, Ruthie. We can read them out loud to you, Zoe.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see here. I can do it.
Okay.
We've got. So if you're built. So actually, someone asked if you can show the one you presented about Jira's ticket challenge with.
Yes. Everyone likes that one. So I was gonna get that one next. Actually, that's what I was scrolling up for. So this one.
It sounds like you got some fans out there.
this one gets lots of love. So this is a Numera template as well, and I've never really played much with a dark theme, and I always found them tricky. And I think the Numera has a really good template for dark theme, and so I was really excited. And I don't usually use red. I'm typically a blue purple. So this was me trying to work some muscles that maybe I have not used before. So this one has a lot of neat things in it. So this again, I built for the challenge, so I was the client, so I got to role play, what would I like to see in this data, and I wanted to use this template. It also includes these charts, which are very popular. Those I made with Charter Calculator. So in Power BI, you have the standard charts, you have, you can get custom charts from the app source. I think it's app source. But you can also, there's a tool that Microsoft put out called Charter Calculator. It's a little bit unintuitive, but I found some really good videos on how to create, and you can create whatever chart you want. It's extremely powerful, and then you just save it, you toss it into Power BI, and it works really well. It's still dynamic. It still works with all the features. I'm trying to figure out something to click that makes more sense. So we can go to a specific project. Well, that's not going to do much actually. So let's go.
And while you're doing that, I'm gonna read a couple more, just because I know we've got a bunch. So I want to get to as many as possible. We've got about 12 minutes left.
Oh gosh.
So let's see here. So if you're building a report on data which multiple audiences are interested, so for example, different levels of stakeholders.
Yep.
What would you recommend from a build perspective? Different pages for each audience, or different reports altogether?
So it really depends on how those audiences, so are they looking at the same chart? They just want to see a segment of the data. So one of the really good examples I just did for one of our clients is that they had multiple entities. And so they wanted to kind of see it side by side, but they wanted to also see the same report, same data by individual entities without them mixed. So what I did is I created a single report to maintain one report and maintain that consistency. But then I added a URL filter on it. So I put a filter on it in the filter pane, not on a slicer on the page, and then created URLs that would, when you click the URL, it would go to that and filter to a specific entity. Now, you can also build into Power BI ways to make the logo change depending on which entity was selected. So they had their own individual logos and everything. And then I was able to pre-filter them and then put them up on a dashboard. So you can see them side by side, always pre-filtered, and you could click from that dashboard into each entity. So for the higher up, and then, but for someone, maybe not, who wasn't interested in the other entities at all, they could just click on the URL and go to theirs and only see that. And then now I only have to maintain one report, which makes me happy. It maintains that consistency, and they have no difference. Another way to do it is with row level, object level security. So if you're running a large franchise business, maybe you want to see all the franchises boiled up and see the metrics, but then you also want the franchisees or each office to see their metrics.
That's a great point there. I think the question was about different level of stakeholders, but that comes back to a really good design issue of, anytime the age-old design best practice of, not creating metrics or something in a report, right? Created in the back end, and so that if it ever changes, you're using it throughout reports. Well, the same kind of concept applies to security or perspectives, like what this question is talking about, where Zoe's saying if it's the same type of report for a peer, then you want that to be like a row level or backend security type thing. So you're not maintaining multiple reports, but you can, we try to make things as seamless as possible. Going back to how long does it take to create reports when you do all this UX work? We come in, we see a lot of people that have too many reports that are of like mind almost, and that could be created into one easily maintainable report so that if anything ever changes, you're not having to change multiple ones. And it's a matter of just changing that perspective that can be not just with a peer, but on different levels of a stakeholder, right, Zoe?
Exactly. And then to the third point, now say they really wanted to see very different things, then I would create the central data model. So the data is going to be all the same. So then that way, when I can create 2 separate reports. I can create 20 reports off of that same data model, that same data set. And that way I can do whatever chart they want, do whatever granularity they want, specific to those audiences. But then they're all looking at the same data. So that should all tie. I mean, it's going to be filtering, of course, but the underlying data will still be the same. So on the same refresh cycle, and they're going to have the same similarity. So and I only have to maintain the one central data set and refresh that, and it will hit all those downstream reports for the various audiences.
Absolutely.
To round up that question. So yes, sorry.
Yeah. So no, that's good. So Zoe, we had another one that said, and this is related to earlier, we had a question on some recommendations for good literature for creating dashboards, and
Oh yeah.
Lauren provided some things, and I know that's something that Zoe has a lot of passion about. I'm a subscriber to Stephen Few, and his books first books are probably 10, 12 years old, but they still apply, and a lot of those same practices now. But the one now here says, as a grad student, I rely heavily on storytelling with data by conflict student design graphs, right? So any tips or resources for designing visual accommodating
So
data?
one of the ones I really like is the storytelling with data, which is very aptly named. I just put a post out just recently, stating that, this is it's an Excel report. You have this kind of chart and table, the pie chart and table, and it's like you have really no idea how these are related. And this is something else I wanted to talk about. I didn't quite get there, is anchoring, or connecting the dots, the same idea that they're talking about here. And then they redesigned it in this way. So you see the titling again is very clear, the colors make sense, this kind of funnel makes sense. So you're like, oh, okay, so there's this many projects, these are the proposals that we submitted, we didn't win, and why, and the ones we did submit, and which ones we lost and why. And so kind of bubbling up, time and resource issues were the top reasons we weren't submitting or winning proposals, which was very hard to see. You probably get there after a while of careful study, but here it's very clear. And that's those kind of metrics you're talking about, how quickly can we get to those really good nuggets? Like, what is the point of this data? What is the point of that chart? What are you trying to do? That kind of stuff. Information is beautiful. That David McCandless, he is fantastic stuff, really good ways of doing that, Toft, anything like that. But what I would like to say is, don't be afraid to reuse some of the stuff, the scrims, or look at those reports and, try stuff new. This one I got from an Instagram post. I saw this really neat kind of report, some of this, and I was like, I really like that design, and I used it as the basis of this one. I think I did credit it. Yeah, so this is where I got this, I was literally strolling around on Instagram and found this, and I was like, that's kind of cool. And, I went and stole the colors and looked at it, and I thought it was fantastic. So, kind of immersing yourself, finding out what you like, what you think works well, and going with it. Any other questions? Sorry.
Yeah. So there's another one that says, what's a general framework you use when creating a business dashboard, and what does your dashboard always need, and what questions do you ask? And I think that goes back to the slide you had earlier, just kind of what's at the center, what types of questions, and we really start with the people pillar and within UX and the type of questions we ask. So when you say create a business dashboard, I hate to give the consulting answer of it depends, but it can very much. That can differ from, what maybe a restaurant executive has that has multiple franchises or multiple restaurant chains, and what they might want to look at versus an oil and gas executive from upstream versus downstream versus midstream. They all are very different, but it really comes back to that slide that Zoe had earlier. Just how are you using this data? What decisions are you trying to make? How does that align with your strategic initiatives as a company? And just making sure that everything we're doing has a purpose in line with those executive initiatives. So but what do they always need, and what questions do you ask? Man, that's we need a lot more informative for that. But Zoe, maybe you want to run with that. So.
Well, I try to pick the most actionable thing. So typically it's, you'll have your budget and your number, and then you'll variance the budget, and then you kind of want to get down to, where it's generally driving that very actionable thing. What's the point of what are they trying to drive? They're trying to make their business, better. But, like this one is a kind of recycling outfit and has, fancy things with currency. But what I wanted to show here was I wanted to focus on the unprofitable. So I wanted to highlight that and kind of fade out anything. So, aluminum and that kind of stuff was, highly profitable. So I just kind of graded out, just like you would on like a car dashboard. I was looking at my car dashboard this morning, and it shows a little check engine light, it's all not lit up. So you don't see it, right? When the engine's doing fine, it's not green. It's just black with the black, so I don't see it. But when it's problem, it goes red, and I notice it very quickly. And so that's kind of what I wanted to show here, is kind of focus on what I wanted to highlight. And so here you can see, they had a major uptick, and we had a major uptick in those things. So
and then I want to make sure everybody sees when that hover. So Zoe showed quite a few examples of when you have a sub-report over just by hovering over a certain metric or something, and where you don't have to click out anymore. Going back to our original question of how many clicks to success. What we try to design here are things where you can get as many answers as you can just by a hover. But you see this natural language type stuff. That can be something that you put into the report, that you can pull from a data dictionary, that you can even use. There's a dynamic. I wouldn't say if it's machine learning or not, but
no, it is machine. I believe it is. But this one, like here, like this little tab up here says across all metrics, total cost had the most interesting recent trend, in the last 28 days. And this is that, dynamic one, and anything you do on the report, and it will. I didn't set this up. This is like out of the box. I just clicked the button. That's what happens. Another one that's really cool is, and I'll just quickly show it. This one, I was just playing around with this. I have not prettied it up quite so yet, but like the key drivers, like, what causes our sale amount to increase? When education is bachelor's, when yearly income goes up, higher income, and you can look at your top segments. And it says, right here, when they purchased and yearly income is in a certain amount. So you can kind of get that. And what I like about Power BI, like you're like, oh yeah, you can do that in Python and R, but I can click on anything and I'll filter it to a specific thing. And it'll tell me the key drivers for New South Wales, purchase date, yearly income.
I love this stuff. And the natural language type things, or this goes back to our first slide, right? Is that, if you need a manual, it's broken. These are the things where you just move your mouse. You don't even have to click. It's intuitively telling you what's happening. And I'll say this: I was, personal note, I took my daughter on college tours last week, and I was walking by a class, and I saw them training on R, and then I saw a Power BI dashboard with these types of things happening. So, guys, we got to catch up, because these kids, that are coming out of college are learning how to do these things. But that's even better, just to see that these advanced types of metrics and putting natural language, that stuff is so cool to see how that's dynamically generated, and just makes these dashboards even more intuitive. So.
Yeah, and to your point, with the tooltips, another way you can include more without overwhelming users to kind of just overlay charts. You can bring in, take out kind of idea. And that way their functional tooltips can get frustrating because you can't click on them. Whereas you can use other things that come in Power BI that can help with those.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have one more question maybe we can try to ask. What's been an unfavorable outcome from presenting information to clients, and what your team learned from it? This is one we talked about, and one example that we talked about in our previous webinars is, these tools are allowing people to empower our users, and we're giving them so much data, and in this information age, going back to that signal and the noise, is finding what that signal is. But one issue we see a lot is people exporting data to their favorite tool, Excel, and they all do it at once, and they extract these huge amounts of data, and then they either and then they crash their desktop with these huge Excel spreadsheets. And so it's that's one example. And one thing we try to do is answer all the questions they can in the tool. Excel's not going away. It's the greatest thing ever invented. But we want to answer as many questions as we can in the tool, make sure people understand how to use it, make it intuitive so they can do that. And then if they are extracting, that's where that whole fail often and fast comes in, is trying to answer those questions live and see how people are using it. Why are they extracting it? And then what else are they doing with it? But that's one thing it's going to be hard to get away from in this information age. But I know that's at least one example, Zoe and Flora, and you have some others.
Yeah, so about Excel, like I think Power BI works amazing with Excel. And a lot of times it's just educating our clients and letting them know that exporting and then building something is a one-off task, but I can show them how to connect directly to the data set behind the Power BI and build something that then they can just save on their computer, go in the next day, refresh it, and get the latest data, and they can continue to use it. So kind of making sure that they have that kind of usability where they're not recreating it every single day. And then they also come up with really cool things with the data types, and the featured data set, so that your organization can have, your data in Excel, in an Excel, way you can just type into a cell and search for, say, a store name, and then you can bring up in Excel without even opening Power BI, nothing to do with it. You have no idea, and then you can say, okay, well, what is the last week's revenue for that store? What is the store's manager name? That kind of stuff. And you can do that directly in Excel. It's extremely powerful. It's one of my favorite features coming up. So I love using
I know
Excel.
I know we're at a time, but I just, that's such an important question. Last thing I will leave you with is the UX will help us exhaust our alternatives for our outcomes to maximize the possibility that we'll have a great outcome with these visualizations. Yes, sometimes the data that comes through is not so exciting or maybe causes some turmoil, but those are the insights, right? Whether good or bad, you'll get them, and you'll be able to use them to be actionable and do something about it. So I'll leave you guys with that. Ruthie, I'll kick it back to you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah. Honestly, guys, you have done an awesome job explaining, how you can take something that was terrible to look at with just this terrible Excel sheet and make something amazing out of it. And not only looks amazing, but really shows great information and helps a company make much better business decisions way quicker. So I really appreciate all the time that you guys put into putting this presentation together. And thank you everyone for joining. I know we had so many people on this call, and I really, really appreciate it. If you do have a question that either you weren't able to ask or we didn't have the time to answer, just send us an email at info@bpcs.com, and we'd love to take this a little bit further and answer any other questions that you have. And be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and that's where we will be adding any new webinars that we have coming up in the future. Our next one is coming up on how and why you should be a tech company and focusing on modern data estate. And that one's going to be on April 14th, led by Eric Vogelpohl. So be sure to keep an eye out for that on our social media. And we will be sending out this recording to everyone. If you want to keep an eye out on your email, we'll also be posting it on our social media so that you can share it with any of your colleagues or friends. But just keep in mind that, if you have any need for data visualization and making better business decisions, we want to be that partner for you. So connect with us, and we'd love to take the next steps with you. So again, if you have any further information that you need, email us at info@bpcs.com. Thank you guys so much, and have an awesome rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.